Hello, I'm Joseph Sardella, and the following is a conversation with six-time documentarian George Ciampa and Roger Kilfoil. George served as a combat veteran across 5 campaigns in Europe during World War II. George's films are a testament to the history and first-hand account of the events in World War II. I encourage you to go to www.letfreedomringforall.org to learn more about him and his historic documentaries. Roger Kilfoil is a retired New York City firefighter who spent his whole career with Ladder Company 131 in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Since 2005, Roger has been involved with different firefighter and veteran organizations. He is also a proud United States Marine Corps veteran, having served from 1978 to 1982. He has been influencing the lives of many as the Vice President of Honor Flight Long Island since 2014. For those who don't know, Honor Flight was created in 2005 after the World War II Memorial was built in Washington, D.C. So far, his chapter based in Long Island, New York, has brought 1,900 veterans to see said memorial at no expense to them. Without a doubt, he is someone who cares deeply about World War II veterans and takes action to show it. The New York City Fire Department Disaster Assistance Response Team is made up of both current and retired New York City firefighters. Roger became part of this team, which had been established in partnership with the American Red Cross to provide immediate aid during natural and man-made disasters throughout the U.S. and Caribbean basin. In addition to these roles, Roger has also served as a docent at the 9/11 Tribute Center for 8 years. The Tribute Center provides an opportunity for those who want to learn about 9/11 directly from those who experienced it firsthand. As someone who lost a family member and 5 firefighters from his own firehouse on that fateful day, Roger is uniquely positioned to share personal stories and insights with the visitors that educate them about the ongoing loss of first responders due to World Trade Center related illnesses. To honor World War II veterans, 17 of them were brought to the 5 New York Islander hockey games as the heroes of the game. Furthermore, they have been taken to events related to World War II in Ohio, Boston, Miami, and Washington, D.C., among others. Additionally, 3 World War II veterans got the opportunity to travel back to Europe and retrace their steps across France, Germany, and the Netherlands. After years of anticipation, they finally took their trip in May 2022. They were so successful that the same Dutch organization and politicians who attended their event extended an invitation for them to come back. People seemed to respond well to 2 things. First, that they had brought 8 World War II veterans. Secondly, it was their gratitude and peace ceremony. Our World War II veterans expressed their gratitude to 100 Dutch grave adoption families by sharing 100 pieces of marble, the same marble used to make the headstones at Arlington National Cemetery. Their next trip to the Netherlands is scheduled for May 2023. This is the George Ciampa Podcast.
Good afternoon, Roger.
Hello, George.
I'm looking at my notes, Roger, and you are on the George Ciampa Podcast, episode number 1. And I'm looking at my notes. And it's my pleasure too, Roger. Roger, as you know, I was on a trip with you to the Netherlands in May, June, where you took 8 of us veterans there. And we could talk about that a little later, but we know each other, and it's been a real pleasure. And I was hesitant to go on that trip with you to the Netherlands with the other veterans because I'd been on others, and I didn't know anything about you until I learned about you. The fact that you were a retired New York City firefighter during 9/11.
Yes,
and I want you to talk a little bit about that now.
Well, I work in Brooklyn. I was a Brooklyn firefighter, and I responded to 9/11 as most of the New York City Fire Department did. We lost 5 firefighters in my house, and I lost a family member, and I knew hundreds of firefighters that were killed and injured, and it had made a big impact on me, the city, and other firemen, of course. And I I can say that 9/11 gave me a different perspective on life and made me better aware of how lucky I am. And I made a commitment to myself to volunteer and to give back. And one of my efforts after I retired was to work with veterans and first responder nonprofit organizations. And
Before
I
we get to
partnered with,
that, excuse me,
yes,
before
sir.
we get into that, could you tell us,
Yes.
when did you start with the fire department and when
Well, I
did you
took the test
retire?
in 1987. I got made a short time later. I got assigned to a firehouse in Brooklyn, and it was a great house, 2 companies, good guys, and I found a home. And it was a neighborhood that is one of the poorest neighborhoods in the 5 boroughs, Red Hook, Brooklyn. They loved their firefighters there. We had a great brotherhood of firemen, and I found a home, and I stayed there for my whole career.
Okay, let me just mention the fact that what else impressed me before I went with you on that tour with the other veterans is the fact that you were in the United States Marine Corps. And
That's true.
tell us when you enlisted, how old were you when you enlisted?
Yeah, well, I was 19 years old. I joined the Marine Corps, and I enlisted for a 4-year enlistment. I got a guaranteed training in electronics. I had an interest in electronics, electricity, and aircraft as a young man, and I was able to continue that interest and educate myself and get an education in those fields.
And I might
And
add,
yes,
once a Marine, always a Marine. I
that's
found out
true,
from,
and I've learned that and believe that every year as I increase my Marine Corps social circles and increase or start participating in events that Marines throw and support fellow Marines and families of fallen Marines. So it has been a very wonderful experience to call myself a Marine and to work with active and veteran Marines. So that's absolutely true. Once a Marine, always a Marine. And
all
I
right,
take great pride in being a Marine Corps veteran.
so then in 2014, I think it was, when you started these honor flights to,
Well, actually, I started on a flight in 2006, soon after I retired. And I simply volunteered to be a guardian with the Long Island Honor Flight. It was their second flight when I joined the organization. And just like anything else, I saw there were some things I could do to help it run better and better share my knowledge of World War II. And it was something that the honor flight. We have an expression: you got the honor flight fever.
well, tell
After
us
volunteering,
tell us what you did with the honor flights. What are honor flights for those viewers that don't know?
that's a good question, George. Honor flight, as some listeners may know, the World War II memorial was not completed in Washington D.C. Until 2005. Many people consider the Marine Corps War Monument, the raising of the flag on Mount Suribachi, the Iwo Jima Memorial. Many Americans thought that was the World War II museum. That's not true. That's the Marine Corps Monument. So after some work, Senator Dole helped to initiate the effort to make the World War II museum, and it became a national effort. Memorial, excuse me. I said museum. I stand corrected. The memorial. So it started in 2006 or 5 or 6. It was completed. Honor flight started soon after. And just to give you a quick summary of how that started, a physician's assistant from the Air Force, became a doctor after his enlistment, and talked to his World War II veterans and asked them, "Are you going to go to the memorial?" And their veterans were saying, "Yes, absolutely, I can't wait." And then he would see that same patient a year later, and the doctor would ask, "How was the memorial?" And they'd say, "Well, I didn't make it. My kids didn't have the time. I don't have the money. I didn't have the wherewithal." And Honor Flight solved those issues that a lot of our veterans had. And that doctor, being a small plane owner and a small plane club, an airplane club, flew a half dozen veterans to the World War II Memorial, Washington, D.C., and Honor Flight was born. And since then, Honor Flight has brought more than 250,000 American veterans to Washington, D.C. to see their memorial. We have since started to include Korean War veterans and Vietnam-era veterans, and even those terminally ill veterans that are for our later wars. So Honor Flight has made a big impact on our country, and I'm proud to say Honor Flight Long Island was the 7th chapter nationally, and now there's over 131 chapters throughout the country. So Honor Flight has been a success story for patriots and for our veteran community, and I'm very proud to be a part of that organization.
Okay, so continue about the time you spent as a docent at the Tribute Center in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, as a after 9/11, I had some, as a lot of firemen had, I had some challenges, and I had a lot of anger, and I had a lot of problem with managing some of these feelings, and through the recommendation of a couple other firemen, they became docents at the Tribute Center. Now, the Tribute Center is an organization run by the 9/11 Families Organization, and at that Tribute Center, there are guests and people that want to learn about 9/11 from people that actually experienced it. So I would give tours, and we'd go through the Twin Towers footprint and the new properties and buildings and the museum. Actually, we'd go through the region there, that park. But I'd be able to share some of the details and features of the WTC Center, and I would share some of my personal experiences. And as a fireman, one of the most important things that I did was I raised people's awareness about the continuing declining health and deaths of first responders. So that became my personal goal, was to educate our national and international visitors that would come to New York City and they would want to visit the World Trade Center site. I did that for 8 years. And I actually met a friend, Stephanie Folwell. As you know, Stephanie and I have co-partnered with a couple of nonprofits, and we have made some great strides in addressing or recognizing our World War II veterans and our our veteran community. I'm sorry, George, did you have a question?
No, it was just before you brought her into the picture, I was just going to ask you how you got involved with Stephanie, because she's been a real asset, as I saw, on that trip to the Netherlands.
Well, yes, Stephanie, you know that she is wonderful at what she does. She's our communications director. And when I met Stephanie, I was an active duty fireman. I was raising 3 young sons, and I had some challenges, and I had some questions that I knew I could seek help. In fact, a lot of men and people that are in the fire department are reluctant to get help through the fire department counseling service unit, because I didn't want to have a record indicating that I may be getting some psychological help or something. There still is a stigma, at least personally, I didn't want to do that. But when I met Stephanie, she was the communications director at a nonprofit that was helping firemen to seek the counseling that they need. And I took advantage of that. And that's when I started my connection with Stephanie. And we agreed that working with, at that time, firefighter programs was something that we both cared about. And we made a pretty good team. And that evolved into and then I did my honor flight thing. And Stephanie was on honor flight for a couple of visits. And here's where my relationship evolved with our veterans. And I'm going to be specific and say my World War II veteran community. My grandfather was a World War II veteran. He was a Seabee that served in the Pacific. Stephanie had two uncles that served in World War II. Now, there's lots of stories. Every one of our World War II veterans have their own stories. And when they come home, they have their own challenges. And what we learned is that first we want to acknowledge and recognize the sacrifice and service of these men. And when we did that, we would go to Washington and we'd take them to the memorial. I'm talking about the history, the weapons, the aircraft, the tanks, the technical stuff. When Stephanie got involved, there was an emotional connection. And the guys fell in love with Stephanie, and the relationship that we had, we both realized one day is not enough time to spend with our veterans. So we did dinners and dances. We celebrated their birthdays. And we learned about some programs, and we ended up taking 28 of our World War II veterans to New Orleans to the World War II Museum. And that's the Steve Ambrose Museum. It started off as the D-Day Museum, as you probably know.
I'm a charter member of that museum, and that was the next question I was going to ask you.
Yes, sir.
What do you think about that museum? And you did take a lot of veterans there.
Yeah, we did. We brought 28, as I was saying, and we've been there multiple times. I've been there like 6 times, and Stephanie and I have been there 3 times with our veterans, and it's been expanding and growing ever since. And I think it's beautiful, and I encourage every American, every young American, to visit that museum. And of course, our opportunity to visit that museum with World War II veterans as docents or guests is closing. So I recommend that a lot of people do that as soon as they can. I love that museum, and I would welcome anyone to visit it.
I agree. Roger, why don't we talk a little bit about this Stephen Siller, I think it's pronounced, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, and what's your connection?
The Tunnel to Towers Foundation, that's correct. They're a organization that has been started as a tribute to Steve Siller. And Steve Siller worked right here in Brooklyn, right down the block from where we live, in my same response area. He was off that morning when the first plane hit the tower. He heard it on the radio. Now, I'm going to tell you about Steve Siller. That man was a fireman's fireman. He had a scanner in his car, so he could hear jobs and be aware of what was going on in the neighborhood. We got some great firemen on this job, but some guys just bring it to the next level, and that was Stephen. When he heard that a plane had crashed into the tower, he made a U-turn and went back to his firehouse. He was supposed to be going golfing with his brothers that morning. So he went back to his firehouse. He threw his gear in the back of the car. In the meantime, a second plane hit the tower. The bridges were closed. The tunnels were closed. They were bringing the planes and landing aircraft. It was, as you know, a scary time. No one knew how bad it was going to get.
I didn't know he was a fireman.
Oh, yes. Steve Siller was a fireman, well respected by the brothers. And, of course, his family wanted to honor him and pay tribute to him. And that's why they started the Steve Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation. And I just got to tell you one thing about Steve. He was going back to the towers. When he drove to the Brooklyn Battery the tunnel, it was closed. He took his gear off, took it out of his car, and he put 80 pounds of gear on and ran through the tunnel. The tunnel, as you may not know, is right there by the footprint of the Twin Towers. And he died that day rescuing people. And the Tunnel to Towers Foundation has been a tribute to him and first responders throughout our country. And many young men and women answered the call of our country.
That's very interesting.
And many of them were catastrophically wounded and injured. And one of the first goals of the Steve Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation was to build smart homes for these catastrophically wounded and injured soldiers, fighting men and women. And to this date, they've built over 200 of these smart homes. And I was one of a handful of Marines that traveled the country. I did it for 3 weeks, and we shared recovered pieces of World Trade Center steel with some of the suppliers and vendors that provided building materials, expertise, and support for building these homes. So I take great pride in being part of that organization, and so does Stephanie. So these are some of the things that we have connected ourselves to our veteran and first responder community, and I have to tell you, it's been very gratifying.
That's great. Well, let's get into what you wanted to do in 1980, I believe it was,
Yeah.
with your first trip to the Netherlands.
Well, Stephanie and I, again, we built some amazing relationships with our World War II veterans, and during the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and that'd be June 6th, we were watching some news programs with a couple of veterans that we were with, and one of our veterans was, upset that he wasn't there, and Stephanie, she's very intuitive. She asked him some questions like, "Why are you so sad? It's supposed to be a great day to celebrate the 75th anniversary," and that was 2019, and we learned that he couldn't believe that there were other veterans, because he flew there. He flew 37 missions over France, and was shot down on his 37th mission, and an American hero, and he thought he should be there, but he didn't have the money, didn't have the wherewithal, didn't know that he could go, didn't know how to plan it, and Stephanie's like, "Well, we'll raise the money, we'll be there with you, and we'll take care of all the planning." So he was like, "Then I would have went." So in that same conversation, that same dinner, another veteran, a Battle of the Bulge veteran, was saying, "Well, we have the anniversary of the Dutch liberation coming up." That dinner, that meal, Stephanie and I decided we are going to the Netherlands. Now, I'm just going to back up a little bit because I don't want to get my chronology mixed up. Stephanie works in the film industry, and she's a field director for, I guess I shouldn't say, but she has a lot of knowledge in the industry. We did 3 documentaries for 3 different World War II veterans. One veteran was a D-Day member of the 82nd Airborne. Another one of our veterans fought in the Battle of the Bulge. And our third veteran was with a tank recon unit that liberated a slave labor camp. One of our veterans wanted to visit one of his buddies that was buried at Margaret Cemetery. That's the only American national cemetery in the Netherlands. When we went there to visit that buddy, there were flowers already on his grave. We thought that was peculiar. We didn't understand. But we learned that grave is one of all the adopted graves. Let me clarify that. There are 8,300 graves.
And 8,301.
You are correct. And if you want to be accurate, and then 1,722 names on the wall of the missing. So that's 10,000 American liberators that have been buried or are missing in the Netherlands that are memorialized there. And every one of those graves have been adopted by a Dutch family for generations. When we learned this powerful gratitude that our Dutch families have for their American liberators, we knew we were going to come back and thank these grave adoption families. Combine that with the desire of our World War II veterans to go back to Europe, it started to fall together. So Stephanie and I made a nonprofit a Mission Margaret in 75. That was what our original nonprofit was. And that was 2019 for a visit in May 5th, the Dutch Liberation Day in 2020. As we all know, the sad history of COVID put an end to that. COVID started around January, and the world started to shut down, and the Netherlands went into lockdown. We had to postpone our trip. So it finally came to fruition this year, 18 months later. It finally came to fruition, and we had a wonderful trip.
And I was there. And I was
You were there, yes, sir. And thank you for joining us, George, because your knowledge and experience with the grave adoption families and that unbelievable, thankless job that you did, you were able to add a certain perspective and element to raising the awareness about the Dutch grave adoption families that we ordinarily would not have had. Only your experience working with the grave registration company would people have been educated about the grave adoption family and men like you. So I want to mention also, we brought Rosie the Riveter. We had 8 veterans and 1 Rosie the Riveter. And as many of our American community know, it wasn't just the fighting men that helped us win this war. It was their wives and daughters and sisters that went to the factories when the men went to war.
A lot of these people, a lot of these viewers don't know anything about Rosie the Riveter. Will you just explain that briefly, what they did?
Yes. During World War II, 16.2 million fighting men went to war. The factories had very few men. So they asked the women to go to the factories to build our tanks, our guns, our ships, our planes, to make weapons and munitions. And 13 million women answered the call and joined the factories and helped make us the arsenal of democracy. And it's an amazing story about the national effort for America. And we recognize that and will not ignore that. And that's why we incorporate Rosie the Riveters on our trips and our experiences, because one of our major goals is to educate our young and our children about this national effort to win this war, which never would have been won without our women helping make it happen.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a very important component about Mission Margaret. And thank you for allowing me a moment to say that, because sadly, a lot of people don't know. I mean, I spoke to a young person recently. I mentioned Rosie the Riveter, and I just got a blank look on her face. She didn't know what it was.
Yeah. No, of course not.
I'm just gonna land the plane as far as Mission Margaret in 75 was our goal to get to the 75th anniversary. But because of COVID and because of the 501c3, our IRS rules, you have to be very deliberate and have a specific purpose. So we had to make a new nonprofit, and our new nonprofit is called Mission Margaret Plus. Now, we can be clever and say plus 2 years, plus parades. Because I don't know if I told you, George, during COVID, we quickly found our efforts changed from planning the trip to planning birthday drive-by parades for 16 of our World War II veterans. We would organize police escorts, fire departments, marching bands, helicopter flyovers, and we would have wonderful birthday celebrations. We would have motorcycle clubs and World War II era military vehicle owners, and we would have parades, and we would close streets and get permits. It's a full-time job doing this, and we would just do amazing things for our World War II veteran community that we know they deserve. They probably would not have been able to celebrate their birthdays with friends and families because of COVID, but we did that, recognizing all the safety protocols with the hand sanitizer and social distancing. But we had many, many beautiful parade experiences. And when the word spread, more people wanted parades. So that's what we did until COVID started to subside. And we kept our World War II veterans engaged and active in the community.
Okay,
and while I'm
Roger.
talking about it, I may as well mention we took 17 World War II veterans to 5 different New York Islanders games for them to be recognized as the heroes of the game. I can tell you, every one of these things that we did took work and planning and effort. And some of them are just amazing stories of success and cooperation. Stephanie putting together some connections, people hearing about what we're doing, just wanted to help recognize our World War II veterans. So it has been a great experience for us. And again, it all culminated in our trip this past May. I know that you were one of our headliners as far as our World War II veterans. It was wonderful. And as a result of that success, we've been invited to return.
I just wanted to say one thing about that, about the trip. What really hit me, and of course I've been at that cemetery several times when I was doing my documentaries, but what really got to me is the ceremonies at the cemetery and all the people that attended. And here we are, all the veterans sitting in wheelchairs or chairs, and here's these adopters lining up to walk to us and shake our hands and thank us for their liberty. And I, in turn, would thank them for adopting a grave and remembering that soldier as if it was one of their own. That impressed me the most. And then there's a couple of other things that really got to me. That museum there was fantastic. And Rotterdam Port, those two things really stand out in my mind. But first, the cemetery and what happened there with all these people coming with their children. Even one guy had a baby in a carriage and says, this little boy is going to be this little boy will be a future adopter. So go ahead from where I cut in.
Well, you didn't cut in, George. That's fine. But I got to tell you, you get it. And just so that our listeners can appreciate this, we are trying to thank the grave adoption families for adopting the memories and graves of their fallen liberators. But they are thanking our veterans. But they are thanking their veterans for their liberty and their freedom. So it is an amazing relationship that we have built with these grave adoption families. And one thing that I haven't mentioned, which is a special token of America's gratitude, is we share. Baby, do I have a piece of marble handy? We share a piece of marble, the same marble that's used to make the headstones at Arlington National Cemetery. We have shared this with 100 Dutch grave adoption families. This simple little stone is a token of America's gratitude. And the impact that this stone has had on the grave adoption families and our World War II veterans is something that will continue as long as Stephanie and I are able to raise funds and to still visit the Dutch people. We love what we are doing. It's a great way for us to recognize the service of our veterans and to give tribute to the Dutch people for never forgetting. As a fireman, you hear all the time, never forget, never forget. The Dutch people, they prove it. They've never forgotten. And we're happy to have created this organization and to have developed relationships and friendships overseas. And we look forward with this podcast's help to spread our mission and our goals. And hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about some of our fundraising efforts and our text to give platforms that will help finance these trips. I think it's just a great thing for you, George, to include us as your first podcast. So we're again, I'm proud to be a part of this and to have an association with you. So thank you, George, for letting me say that.
You're welcome, Roger. Certainly welcome. I'm privileged to have you on. Let me just say one more thing about the Dutch people. They amaze me. Most of them speak English. And on my trips there in the past, a superintendent, one of our superintendents at the cemetery, told me that 300 people a day on average come to visit that cemetery. 300
It's
people a day.
amazing.
I mean, it is
I
amazing.
could not believe that. I learned that in May.
Yeah,
I could not believe that.
You can't believe. I like, people in the U.S. need to know how dedicated the Dutch are to our fallen, and it really gets to me because, as you know, what I did in World War II, we won't get into here, but I saw many
job, brother.
thousands of our dead soldiers that gave their lives for our freedom and for the freedom of the people in the other countries. That's why I call my website letfreedomringforall.org. Let freedom ring for all. And I really mean that.
You know, George, when we returned in September, we had our trip in May with our veterans and Rosie, and we returned to build up more relationships and to plan another visit. And September 17th is another important date in Dutch liberation history. And what the school children do is they put flowers on the graves of every liberator on September 17th. This is another event that we participated in that it's just amazing. And our kids don't know anything. So that's another important component of what Stephanie and I are doing, is to have an education bridge between American students and Dutch students. And we'll be doing similar Zoom-type meetings with lecturers and museum curators and talking about and interviewing World War II veterans and educating American and Dutch children. And maybe the American children will learn something.
Yeah, let me interrupt you there before, because we're going to have to end this pretty soon. We could talk about it all day, but let me tell you. Let me get back to these adopters. What do adopters do? They put flowers on the graves of the soldier they adopted from time to time. The young people there who do websites to find out how old were these soldiers, because there's no date of birth on the grave markers, just the date of death. And even people that visit these cemeteries don't even realize that. When I give my talks and find out how many people have visited.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that.
No, they don't.
A lot of people don't know that.
They don't know that. But so what do these young people do that have these websites? They find out who some of the family members are. Of course, the parents are gone now, but they do get brothers or sisters or nieces or nephews, and they find out about the soldier, how old he was, which the first time I went back to see a cemetery in Normandy, 50 years later, and realized that there was no date of birth, I went ballistic. I said, people walking through here have no idea how old these soldiers are. I know how old they were, 18, 19, 20. Some of them lied about their age. They were 16 years old. So these adopters, and what these people do, these young people there who have websites, what they actually do is they get a picture of the veteran, and they put those pictures at the base of the monument when they have like Memorial Day or whatever. They actually put pictures of the soldier that they adopted at the base of the monuments. Now,
the faces of Margaret. Yeah, they do many amazing things.
That's what it's called.
Many of the grave adoption families and the young people, they don't just adopt the grave because they're not physically manicuring the grave.
No.
What the biggest impact they're doing is they are adopting the memories, and they're caring for their liberators.
And they're very proud of it.
They are proud.
I spoke to a young boy one day when I was there, and he says, when my parents are gone, I'm going to be the adopter of the grave. It's amazing.
And at one
time they had a waiting list for people that wanted to adopt graves, and they don't even have a waiting list anymore because
years.
Yeah, but
they're
anyway,
waiting for years.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough.
You know, a lot of these Dutch families have made connections in their research efforts. They have made connections with the family of their soldier.
Exactly.
And I have to say that they bring great comfort to American families, knowing, because many of these soldiers' graves have not been visited by their American families. So it's wonderful for them to share a photograph of their loved one's grave, headstone, with flowers and pictures and such on that headstone. And again, it brings great comfort to American families, and we want to recognize these families. It recognizes our soldier, it gives them tribute, but it shows the gratitude that the Dutch people have for their liberation, and we are showing our gratitude for the Dutch people for adopting these graves. It's an amazing thing that we are doing, and we're just a small part of just trying to show our pride in our soldiers and recognize their sacrifice.
Okay, Roger, let's talk about the next trip, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
Okay. I just want to say a couple of things. We could really, and you're right, we could spend a long time talking about some of the great things that have been going on with Mission Margaret Plus. But I do want to talk about our upcoming fundraising efforts. We will have some shirts by Nine Line Apparel. We are, as we speak, we are designing a T-shirt that will be available for sale, which will help raise funds for our next trip. I did casually mention that we have been invited to return in May, and we will. We hope to have another 8 World War II veterans and another Rosie the Riveter on our trip. One way that people can make our mission happen is by using our Text to Give platform. And you can text, I'm surprised I didn't write that down, but you can text WW2GO. That's WW, the number 2, GO, to the short code 243725. So text WW2GO to 243725 for your tax-deductible donation to Mission Margaret Plus. And we are also having a fundraiser in February. It will be a part of one of our multiple efforts with photography, photographs, painting, and a lecture, and a Q&A session with some of our World War II veterans, and some live music. So it'll be one of those fun events here in New York City, and I hope that we can maybe have another podcast and announce the actual details about that. But we have been very busy organizing our different events, and right now, in fact, tonight, we have our Director of Operations in the Netherlands, Jacqueline Leusberg. I think you may remember Jacqueline. She is Dutch, and she's a grave adopter. That's the woman that was adopting the grave that had the flowers on it. That's how this all started for Stephanie and I. We saw the flowers on the grave, and we found out that was the grave that was adopted. And this highly motivated woman, we partnered with her, and now she's our Director of Operations in the Netherlands. She's on a dinner cruise with another team member for the American European Friendship Association, a very influential organization that has befriended many American organizations and helps to improve our relationships and trade and education. And we're happy to have partnered with them. And it's just the snowball is getting bigger and bigger with the amount of people that want to help make this trip continue for years and years. But we're working on May right now.
Well, it was my pleasure, Roger, to have you on George Ciampa podcast, episode number 1. Thank you for being on. Thank you for being on.
George, thank you. Happy holidays to you and yours. And thank you for this opportunity to be the first one. And hopefully we will speak again.
Yes.
Thank you very much, George.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.